Most people who have grown up in church have been given a map of the afterlife that looks something like this. You die, you go to heaven or hell. The end. It is clean, it is simple, it fits on a bumper sticker, and it leaves out approximately 70% of what the Bible actually says about what happens after death. Because the Bible does not describe two destinations, it describes 7 distinct spiritual realms, each one created by God for a specific purpose, each one populated by specific beings at specific moments in history, each one playing a specific role in the unfolding of a story that began before the first human being drew breath and ends with a reality so extraordinary that the human mind cannot fully process it. Here is what most people never realize about the biblical afterlife. The reason most Christians have a simplified 2-destination map is not because the Bible is simple on this subject. It is because the English language has done something catastrophic to the original text. It has taken 4 completely different words in Hebrew and Greek, 4 words describing 4 completely different places, and translated all of them with the same single English word: hell, Sheol, hell, Hades, hell, Gehenna, hell, Tartarus, hell. 4 different places, 4 different purposes, 4 different populations, 1 English word that collapses all of them into a single blurry concept that nobody can fully understand because the concept itself is a mistranslation. When you read the Bible in the original languages, when you let each word mean what it actually means, the afterlife that emerges is not a simple binary. It is a map, a detailed, theologically precise, historically grounded map of 7 spiritual realms that together tell the complete story of what God is doing with human beings and spiritual beings from death to the final state of all things. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you will have that map. You will understand every realm the Bible describes, what it is, who is in it, what it is for, and how it fits into the larger story. And you will never read a Bible passage about death or the afterlife the same way again. Before we map the 7 realms, we have to understand the world the Bible was written into. Because the ancient world had an extremely sophisticated understanding of the afterlife, and the biblical revelation did not arrive into a vacuum. It arrived into a world already full of competing afterlife maps, and understanding those competing maps makes the biblical one all the more precise and all the more extraordinary. In ancient Mesopotamia, the civilization of Babylon and Assyria that forms the backdrop for so much of the Old Testament, the afterlife was understood as a single dark underworld called the Land of No Return. The Sumerian word was Kur, the Akkadian equivalent was Irkala. Both described a vast underground realm of dust and darkness, where all the dead went regardless of how they had lived. The Mesopotamian afterlife was not primarily about justice or reward. It was about fate, the inevitable destination of every living thing. In ancient Egypt, the afterlife was more complex and more optimistic. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and instructions for navigating the afterlife, describes a judgment in which the deceased's heart is weighed against a feather representing Ma'at, truth and cosmic order. Those whose hearts were light enough passed into the field of reeds, a paradise that mirrored the best of life on earth. Those whose hearts were too heavy were devoured by the monster Amit, part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, and ceased to exist. In ancient Greece, the underworld, Hades, was ruled by the god of the same name and divided into regions. Elysium was for heroes and the virtuous. The Asphodel Meadows were for ordinary people who had done neither exceptional good nor exceptional evil. Tartarus was for the wicked, specifically for the Titans and those who had offended the gods. Here is what most people never realize about the relationship between these ancient afterlife traditions and the biblical revelation. The Bible does not simply adopt these traditions. It does not borrow uncritically from the surrounding cultures, but it does use vocabulary that its original audience would have recognized, vocabulary like Sheol in Hebrew and Hades in Greek, and fills that vocabulary with a completely different content. A content shaped not by mythology or speculation, but by divine revelation. The God who speaks through the biblical text is not introducing a brand new concept of the afterlife from scratch. He is correcting, clarifying, and ultimately revealing the truth that the surrounding cultures had been groping toward. The truth about what death actually is, why it exists, what happens in it, and how it will ultimately be resolved. With that background established, we can now go through every realm the Bible describes. The first realm is Sheol. and it is the foundational concept from which every other afterlife realm in the Bible extends. The Hebrew word Sheol appears 65 times in the Old Testament. It is the most common afterlife term in the Hebrew Bible. And for a long time, for the majority of Old Testament history, it was understood as the single destination of all the dead, righteous and wicked alike, kings and servants, prophets and pagans, everyone. Job 3:13-19 describes Sheol in some of the most vivid language in the Old Testament. Job, in the depths of his suffering, longs for death as a release. And what does he imagine death will bring? There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. There the prisoners are at ease together. They do not hear the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slave is free from his master. Sheol in Job's description is a place of rest, a place where the inequalities of earthly life are levelled. No more taskmasters, no more toil, but also no more activity, no more relationship, no more conscious engagement with the living world above. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Psalm 6.5. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol who will give you praise? The Old Testament picture of Sheol is not primarily a picture of punishment or reward. It is a picture of diminishment, of existence reduced to its most minimal possible form. The shades, the Hebrew Rephaim, who inhabit Sheol are not the full persons they were in life. They are shadows, reduced, diminished, waiting. Here is what most people never realize about Sheol in the Old Testament. The gradual revelation of Scripture introduces a distinction within Sheol that becomes clearer as the biblical narrative progresses. Not all of Sheol is the same, and the clearest picture of this distinction comes not from the Torah or the prophets, but from the lips of Jesus himself. Luke 16:19-31. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus. A poor man named Lazarus dies and is carried by the angels to Abraham's side, the Greek kolpon Abraham, literally the bosom of Abraham. A rich man who ignored him dies and goes to Hades and is in torment. Between them is a great chasm that cannot be crossed. Two men, both dead, both in Hades, the Greek equivalent of Sheol, but in completely different conditions. One in comfort, described as Abraham's side, a place of rest and peace. One in torment, described as a place of agony, of fire, of desperate thirst. Here is what most people never realize about this parable. Jesus is not describing heaven and hell as Christians in the modern church understand them. He's describing two distinct sections within the single realm of Sheol, the realm of all the dead. Abraham's side is not heaven. Abraham is still in it. The torment is not the lake of fire. It is a temporary holding place, not the final destination. Both sections of Sheol are waiting rooms. The comfort side and the torment side are separated by a chasm, but both are contained within the larger realm of the dead. This distinction between the comfortable side and the torment side of Sheol is the foundational division within the first spiritual realm, and it sets up everything that follows. The second realm is what Jesus calls paradise. The Greek word paradisos comes from the Persian word peridaza, meaning a walled garden or enclosed park. It appears only 3 times in the New Testament. Luke 23:43, Jesus to the thief on the cross, "Truly I say to you today you will be with me in paradise." 2 Corinthians 12:4, Paul describing being caught up to paradise. Revelation 2:7, the promise to the overcomer of the right to eat from the tree of life which is in the paradise of God. But paradise has a history that goes much further back than the New Testament. The Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, uses paradisos to translate the Hebrew word for the Garden of Eden in Genesis 2. The garden where God walked with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day, the place where the tree of life grew, where the physical and spiritual overlapped, where the barrier between God and humanity was at its thinnest. That garden is the first paradise. Here is what most people never realize about the 3 forms of paradise across Scripture. The first form is the Garden of Eden, Genesis 2, a physical location where heaven and earth overlapped. God could descend and walk with his people. The tree of life provided access to immortality. This paradise was cut off at the fall, Genesis 3:24, cherubim with a flaming sword guarding the way back to the tree of life. The second form is the paradise that Jesus opened through his death and resurrection. When Jesus descended into Hades, Acts 2:27, Ephesians 4:9, he announced his victory to those held in Abraham's side, the comfortable section of Sheol, and Ephesians 4:8 records that when he ascended he led a host of captives. The righteous dead who had been waiting in Abraham's side were transferred to a new state, a purely spiritual paradise, not yet the final state, not yet involving physical bodies, but a state of being with Christ that Paul describes in Philippians 1:23 as far better than anything in this present life. The third form of paradise, the ultimate expression, is the New Jerusalem of Revelation 21:22, the complete, permanent physical spiritual union of heaven and earth. The tree of life reappears. Revelation 22:2. The river of life flows through the center of the city, and God himself dwells with his people permanently, without the veil, without the barrier, face to face. Three forms of paradise. First, God visits humanity in a physical garden. Second, humanity visits God in a spiritual realm. Third, God makes his permanent home with humanity in a renewed physical spiritual reality. The trajectory of paradise is not away from the physical. It is toward the full reunification of the physical and the spiritual, which is where the whole story of Scripture has been heading from the moment the first paradise was closed. The third realm is Gehenna, and this is the one that Jesus talks about the most, and that most English translations render as hell, which is accurate in terms of the destination it describes but misleading in terms of the imagery it carries. The Greek Gehenna comes from the Hebrew Gehinnom, the Valley of Hinnom, a specific, real, geographical location. A ravine on the southwestern edge of Jerusalem. You can visit it today, it is still there. In the Old Testament, the Valley of Hinnom was associated with some of the darkest practices in Israelite history. 2 Chronicles 28:3. King Ahaz burned his sons as offerings in the Valley of Ben Hinnom. 2 Chronicles 33:6. King Manasseh burned his sons there. Jeremiah 7:31. The prophet condemns the people for burning their sons and daughters in the fire at Topheth in the Valley of Ben Hinnom. The valley was the site of child sacrifice to the god Molech, one of the most condemned practices in the entire Old Testament. Jeremiah 19:6 records God's judgment on the valley. The days are coming when this place will no longer be called Topheth or the Valley of Ben Hinnom but the Valley of Slaughter. The valley of the worst human evil became the symbol of the worst divine judgment. By the 1st century AD, the Valley of Hinnom had become Jerusalem's garbage dump. Fires burned continuously, consuming the waste of the city. Worms and maggots infested the decaying material. The smoke was constant. The smell was pervasive. Everyone in Jerusalem knew exactly what Gehenna looked like and smelled like because it was visible from the city walls. And Jesus uses this specific, real, known location as the image for the final destination of the unrighteous. Mark 9:43-48. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than with 2 hands to go to hell, Gehenna, to the unquenchable fire, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. Jesus is quoting Isaiah 66:24, the final verse of Isaiah, and applying the imagery of the perpetually burning, perpetually decaying garbage dump of Gehenna to the final state of those who are permanently separated from God. Here is what most people never realize about Jesus' description of Gehenna. The worm that does not die, the Greek skolex, is not a worm that torments the inhabitants from outside. In the context of a garbage dump, a worm that does not die is a worm consuming something from within. It is the image of decay that never completes, destruction that never finishes, dissolution that never ends, and the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 8:12, 13:42, 13:50, 22, 13:24, 51, 25, 30. 6 times. Jesus uses this phrase to describe the response of those in the final judgment. The Greek brigmos tonodonton, gnashing of teeth, is not primarily a description of pain. In the Septuagint and in classical Greek literature, the gnashing of teeth describes intense anger and hostility. Acts 7:54. The crowd who stoned Stephen gnashed their teeth at him in rage. Those in Gehenna are not primarily in a state of regret and sorrow. They are in a state of perpetual fury, of anger that has nowhere to go and nothing to consume but itself. Gehenna is not Sheol. It is not a holding place. It is not a waiting room. It is the final destination. The lake of fire that Revelation 20:14-15 describes as the second death, the permanent, irreversible, eternal state of separation from the God who is the source of all life. The fourth realm is Tartarus, and it is the most obscure of all the realms the Bible describes, appearing only once in the entire New Testament and referring not to human beings at all, but to a specific category of spiritual being. 2. Peter 2:4. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned but cast them into hell, the Greek Tartaruses, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. Tartaruses, the only use of this word in the entire New Testament. It is the verb form of Tartarus, a word borrowed directly from Greek mythology, where Tartarus was the deepest, darkest pit of the underworld, the place below Hades where the Titans were imprisoned. Peter is using this word to describe the imprisonment of a specific group of angels who sinned in a specific way that resulted in a specific judgment, unlike anything experienced by the demons who roam the earth or the fallen angels who function under Satan's command. Jude 6 describes the same beings, and the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Who are these angels? Peter and Jude both connect them to the days of Noah, 2 Peter 2. 5 moves directly from the imprisoned angels to the flood. Jude 6 connects them to those who indulged in sexual immorality, the language echoing the account in Genesis 6. 1:4 of the sons of God taking the daughters of men as wives. Here is what most people never realize about Tartarus. It is not the final destination of these beings. It is a holding cell, a prison, specifically designed for the most egregious violators of the created order. Not all fallen angels are in Tartarus. The demons who operate on earth, who inhabit people and places, who are subject to the authority of Jesus in the Gospel accounts, they are free to roam. The beings in Tartarus crossed a line so significant that God removed them from the earth entirely and imprisoned them in chains of gloomy darkness until the final judgment. The existence of Tartarus reveals something important about the biblical understanding of spiritual beings and divine justice. Not all spiritual rebellion is treated the same way. Not all fallen angels are in the same condition. There are degrees of judgment, degrees of confinement, applied to spiritual beings according to the nature of their rebellion, and the most extreme rebellion produces the most extreme confinement. The fifth realm is the abyss, and unlike Tartarus, which is a place of imprisonment for specific fallen angels, the abyss in Revelation is a place of confinement for demonic spirits, with a very specific role in the end-time narrative. The Greek abyssos means bottomless or without depth, from a meaning without and byssos meaning bottom. It appears 9 times in the New Testament, once in Romans 10:7, once in Luke 8:31, and 7 times in Revelation. In Romans it describes the realm of the dead in general. In Luke it describes what the demons beg Jesus not to send them to when he encounters the Gerasene demoniac. In Revelation it functions as a specific demonic prison connected to the events of the tribulation. Luke 8:31 is one of the most revealing passages about the abyss. When Jesus commands the legion of demons to leave the man among the tombs, and the demons recognize his absolute authority, they beg him not to command them to depart into the abyss. The Greek is ten abysson apelthein, to depart into the bottomless pit. These demons would rather inhabit pigs than face the abyss. The abyss represents a loss of freedom, of activity, of the ability to operate in the physical world, and demons fear it. Revelation 9:1-11 describes what happens when the abyss is opened at the 5th trumpet judgment. A star fallen from heaven, a fallen angel whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek Apollyon, both meaning destroyer, is given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opens it. Smoke pours out like the smoke of a great furnace, and from the smoke come locusts with the power of scorpions, creatures of judgment that torment those without the seal of God for 5 months. Here is what most people never realize about the abyss in Revelation. The creatures that emerge are not new creations conjured for the tribulation. They are beings that were already imprisoned in the abyss, held there, confined there, unable to operate in the physical world. When the abyss is opened, they are released, their confinement ends, And the destruction they were designed to bring, the destruction that has been held back by their imprisonment, is unleashed on the earth. Revelation 21:3 returns to the abyss one more time. After the return of Christ, an angel comes down from heaven with the key to the abyss and a great chain. He seizes the dragon, Satan himself, and binds him and throws him into the abyss for 1,000 years. The abyss is locked and sealed over him to prevent him from deceiving the nations until the 1,000 years are ended. The abyss is not the final destination of Satan. It is a temporary confinement, a holding place, for the 1,000 years of Christ's reign. After the 1,000 years, Satan is released for a short time, leads one final rebellion, and then faces his ultimate judgment, the lake of fire, where Revelation 20:10 says he will be tormented day and night forever and ever. The sixth realm is heaven itself. And here is what most people never realize about heaven in the biblical text. The English word heaven translates the Hebrew Shamaim and the Greek Uranos, both of which can refer to three distinct things depending on context. The first heaven is the atmosphere, the sky, the air, the space above the earth where the birds fly and the clouds form. Genesis 1:8. God called the expanse heaven. The rain comes from heaven. The birds fly in heaven. The second heaven is outer space, the realm of the stars and planets. Genesis 1:14. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, the stars of heaven, the host of heaven, the astronomical universe." The third heaven is the dwelling place of God, the realm of the divine presence. This is what Paul refers to in 2 Corinthians 12:2 when he describes being caught up to the third heaven, the paradise of God, the presence of God, the throne room of God. Here is what most people never realize about the third heaven as the Bible describes it. It is not a static, passive realm of cloud and harp. It is a place of extraordinary activity. Isaiah 6, seraphim cry, "Holy, holy, holy," without ceasing. Revelation 4:5, 24 elders, 4 living creatures, the throne blazing with fire, thousands upon thousands of angels worshipping. Revelation 8:1. The only time heaven goes silent is for half an hour when the seventh seal is opened, because the silence itself is so shocking that it requires comment. The throne room of God that John sees in Revelation is not a peaceful retirement community. It is the command center of the universe, the place from which every decision in history flows, every angel is dispatched, every prayer is heard, every judgment is decreed. It is the most dynamic, most active, most intense environment in all of creation. And here is what most people never realize about the relationship between the third heaven and the final state of things. The third heaven as it currently exists is not the final destination of redeemed humanity. Revelation 21:1-3 records that John sees a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the new Jerusalem and the city of God comes down out of heaven from God to the new earth. God is not taking his people up to where he currently lives. He is bringing where he currently lives down to where his people will be. The direction of movement in the final state is not upward, away from the physical creation. It is downward, the divine descending into the renewed physical creation and making it his permanent home. The seventh realm is the new earth, and it is the final destination, the ultimate reality, the end toward which every other realm in the biblical map has been pointing. Revelation 21:1-5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away." And he who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new, the new earth, not heaven as a disembodied spiritual realm, a new earth, physical, tangible, real, in which the separation between the divine and the human that began in Genesis 3 is permanently, completely, and irreversibly ended." Here is what most people never realize about the new earth. The Greek word translated new in Revelation 21, one is kainos, not neos. Neos means new in the sense of recently made, brand new from scratch. Kainos means new in the sense of renewed, transformed, made new in quality. The same thing made into something better rather than something completely different replacing it. The new earth is not a replacement for this earth. It is this earth renewed, this earth transformed, this earth freed from the curse that the fall brought upon it. Romans 8:21. The creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. The creation that has been groaning, Romans 8:22, groaning in the pains of childbirth, is not going to be discarded. It is going to be delivered. The New Jerusalem, the city that descends from heaven to the new earth, has dimensions that strain the imagination. Revelation 21:16. 12,000 stadia in length, width, and height, approximately 1,400 miles in every direction. A perfect cube, echoing the dimensions of the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle and temple, the innermost sanctuary where God's presence dwelt. The entire city is the Holy of Holies. The entire city is the most sacred space, the place where God is present, expanded to cosmic scale. Revelation 21:22. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. No temple, because the entire city is temple. The division between sacred and secular, between the space where God is present and the space where ordinary life happens, is gone forever. Everything is sacred. Everything is holy. The veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, the veil that was torn from top to bottom at the moment of Jesus' death, is never replaced. The access to God that the cross opened is the permanent condition of the new creation. Revelation 22:1-5. The river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the city. On either side of the river the tree of life, the same tree whose access was blocked by the cherubim with the flaming sword in Genesis 3:24, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree for the healing of the nations. The tree of life is back. The access that was closed in Genesis 3 is open forever in Revelation 22. The story that began in a garden ends in a garden city. The circle closes. The wound heals. The exile ends. And the invitation that God spoke in the garden, the invitation to walk with him in the cool of the day, is answered permanently, completely, without the possibility of separation. No longer will there be anything accursed. Revelation 22:3. The curse of Genesis. 3. The thorns and thistles, the pain of childbirth, the sweat of toil, the inevitability of death is reversed, not managed, not compensated for. Reversed, completely, finally, forever. Here is where every thread converges. 7 realms, 1 map, 1 story moving through all of them toward one destination. Sheol, the holding place of all the dead, divided between comfort and torment. Paradise, in 3 forms, moving from the Garden of Eden to the spiritual presence of Christ, to the ultimate physical spiritual union of the new earth. Gehenna, the lake of fire, the second death, the permanent separation from God. Tartarus, the prison of the most egregiously rebellious spiritual beings. The abyss, the demonic dungeon whose opening unleashes tribulation and whose closing imprisons Satan. Heaven, the third heaven, the throne room of God, the current dwelling of the redeemed awaiting the resurrection. The new earth, the final destination, the permanent home, the renewed physical spiritual reality where God makes his dwelling with his people forever. 7 realms. But by the end of time, only 2 remain. The lake of fire, permanent separation from God, inhabited by everyone and everything that chose separation over the entire course of history. And the new earth, permanent union with God, inhabited by everyone whose name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The resurrection is the event that makes the final 2 permanent. Every human being who has ever lived will be raised. 1 Corinthians 15:22, John 5:28-29. The righteous to the resurrection of life, the unrighteous to the resurrection of judgment, not to a spiritual existence only, to bodily existence. Because God made human beings as physical spiritual creatures, and the redemption he offers is not the escape of the soul from the body. It is the resurrection of the whole person, body and soul, into the fullness of what it means to be human, 1 Corinthians 15:42-44. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body, not a spirit without a body. A spiritual body, a body transformed, glorified, freed from the limitations of mortality, capable of bearing the fullness of the life that God intends for his image bearers. The map of the afterlife that the Bible describes is not a map of escape from the physical into the purely spiritual. It is a map of restoration, of the physical and the spiritual being brought back together in the way they were always meant to be, in the way they were in the garden before everything went wrong. Here is the deepest thing the 7 realms of the afterlife teach. The complexity of the biblical afterlife is not a theological puzzle to be solved. It is a testimony to the seriousness with which God takes both justice and restoration. He is not indifferent to what happens after death. He is not running a simple binary system of reward and punishment that can be summarized in 2 words. He is running a comprehensive, multi-stage, carefully ordered process of judgment and redemption that accounts for every human being, every spiritual being, every moment of history and every dimension of existence, physical and spiritual. The God who created 7 distinct spiritual realms for 7 distinct purposes is the God who has thought through every detail of what happens after death with a precision and a comprehensiveness that our simple 2-destination map could never contain. And here is the personal implication that none of the 7 realms allows us to avoid. The direction of movement in the biblical afterlife is not random. It is determined by choices made in the one realm that you currently inhabit. The only realm in which the final destination is not yet fixed. The only realm in which the question is still open. This one. The earth you're standing on right now is the only place in the entire 7-realm map where the outcome is still being determined. Sheol has no decisions left to make. The abyss has no exits. Gehenna has no appeals. Paradise has no losses. The new earth has no departures. Only here, only now, only in the realm where death has not yet arrived, and the 7 realms are still ahead. Only here is the question still open. Revelation 22:17. The Spirit and the bride say, "Come," and let the one who hears say, "Come," and let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who desires take the water of life without price. Without price. The entry into the final and best of the 7 realms, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, the city where God dwells with his people forever, is free, not earned, not deserved, not purchased by religious performance or moral achievement, taken by the one who is thirsty, by the one who desires, by the one who comes. The invitation is still open, the map is in your hands, and the only realm where you can respond to the invitation is the one you're in right now. If this study meant something to you, if the 7 realms of the afterlife landed differently today than they ever have before, the single most helpful thing you can do is subscribe. Every video on this channel goes this carefully into the language, the history, and the complete biblical picture behind what Scripture actually says. Leave a comment. It can be just 1 word. Even a single word in the comments helps other people find this conversation. And there are people out there who have been given a 2-destination afterlife map their entire lives and have never seen what we looked at today. Share it with someone who has genuine questions about what happens after death. Share it with someone who thinks the afterlife is too complicated to understand. Share it with someone who needs to know that the God who designed 7 distinct spiritual realms designed one of them specifically for people who are thirsty enough to come. God bless you, and please keep us in your prayers.